Somebody was faithful 8 years ago and built a shoebox, and it found its way to a low place in Russia where a young man who was in an orphanage, I believe with your sister, he received a shoebox. And he's here tonight to share with us the impact that the Lord had through that shoebox and how it eventually led him, was part of the process, to him coming to know him as his Savior. So welcome with me, Valery.
I'm Valery, and I was born in Russia. I grew up on a farm with my parents, and growing up on a farm wasn't very easy. I had to get up since I was like 6, I had to get up every day in the morning to go work in the garden, then after that work in the barn after lunch, and life wasn't very easy. And it was a hard work, and it was a lot of work, and I lived with my parents until I was 8, and after my mom passed away and my dad went to jail, I lived with my uncle for about a year. Well, my uncle was my mom's brother, and I lived with him about a year until bus came by and picked me up and took me to the orphanage. And the first year in the orphanage was not very easy life, because I didn't have my parents when I had hard times, or I had to share my feelings, or when I got in fights, or when I got beaten up, I couldn't go cry on their shoulder, and they couldn't tell me or comfort me or tell me they love me. And living in the orphanage was kind of hard, because every child there they're hopeless. Every morning they get up, they look forward to the day, they want the day to be over as soon as possible. And everybody angry, and people who work there get affected by it a lot too, because the anger we have usually ends up being with them, and we usually get in fight with people who work there or into arguments, and it was just not a very nice place to be at. And living in the orphanage, all the clothes we owned, not clothes we had, we didn't own them. It was basically public clothes, and we just, every morning we go to school, we walk into this room and get the clothes, and when we come back home, we give them back to the lady, give it to us, she washes it, same thing all over next day. So this lady got hired, and she was going through the paper, and it was list of names, and she came up to me one day, she goes, "Are you Valery and that?" And I go, "Yes, I am." And she looked at me like all excited and goes, "This is amazing." She goes, "I met your mom in college," and this was way before, not way before I was born, it was before I was born. And she said we used to be best friends. We basically did everything together. We used to be like brothers and sisters. I'm sorry. They said we used to be like sisters. And for that few months she was working there, we became very close. I love that lady. She was very sweet. And she took me home for a week. And there's a paper called pre-adoption paper. Is when you can sign the paper saying you took this child, and it's when people take children to their house and just see how they will act, and if you get along with them or not. So she took me for a week, and that week I was in her house, I just enjoyed every second of it. Then after that she took me for a month, and that month is when she told me that she's a Christian and she's a believer in Christ, and she told me a little bit about it. I didn't understand much, and I was young, and I was still afraid to ask more about it. I was curious, but I was still afraid to ask more about it. And 2 days later was Sunday, and she was going to church, and the city that I lived in, before I got to the orphanage, the farm I lived in was very small, and everybody knew each other. Everybody basically owned keys to each one of the houses, and everybody knew each other by first and last name, so it was very small. And when I got to the orphanage, it was kind of an upgrade. It was a little bit bigger. It was a semi-city, and then farmhouses on the sides. And they didn't have church there. But I said I went to church with her, but it wasn't a church. It was a small house meeting, and it was someone lived in the house, but they also had meetings there for Bible studies. And she asked me if I wanted to come, and I said sure. And that was the first time I actually heard words out of the Bible, and about Jesus and about God. I didn't become a believer, but I was young and I got curious. I wanted to know more, and just like I said, it wasn't that much later that she asked me to go to church with her. I was afraid to ask more. And then when the month was over, which the sad part came, she came up to me, she said, I'm sorry, I can't adopt you, because she said she was going to adopt me because she said, I can't afford you. Her and her husband had a younger daughter, and she said, we can't afford you. My husband doesn't make much money, her husband didn't make much money. So she told me, we can't afford you, so I ended up going back to the orphanage. I wasn't looking forward to it, but I had to go back to the orphanage. And a year later is when I received the Operation Christmas Child shoebox, and that was like kind of God put some water on the seed, and seed just cracked and the first stem came out. We walk into the orphanage, and this lady hands us the boxes, and the lady that was handing the boxes, she worked in the orphanage. It wasn't the missionaries who handed the box, so that was the part of the reason I didn't receive the gospel with that. But my sister, my younger sister, she's here in America too now. But she did receive the gospel with it because she was there when the missionaries handing out the boxes. But the lady that handed out the boxes, she kind of keeps account of kids there. So she said we're only one that we're missing out of there for that day. So she set aside some boxes for us. So she was handing out us the boxes to me, to my other friends. And we kind of looked at her, and before we asked what is this for, she kind of said the expression, and our faces were confused. So she told us it's just a gift for you, and I don't know, she didn't go into explanations. I don't know if she didn't know, or she just saw we were all angry, she just didn't want to mess with us, so she just kind of walked away. So we just, as I always say, okay, fine. We walked into our room, and we looked at each other, and we opened the boxes, and all of that hatred and anger we had at each other and about the day just kind of forgot about it, kind of dissolved. And we all just looked at each other, and all that hope that we didn't have as orphan kids just kind of came in, and we all got so excited. We started rushing through the boxes, started to look into our stuff and start getting everything out. And I remember receiving a toothbrush, toothpaste, notebook. The two things really stood out to me. Well, there's three, but the third one, I don't remember if it came in my box or my friend's box, so that's why I can't say three, because I remember. But it was a t-shirt, and just like I said, we didn't own any clothes there. And receiving a t-shirt that belonged to me and my friend, we used to get into arguments all the time, whose turn to wear it. Even though it didn't belong to one of us, but we always get into arguments whose turn is to wear it. But we used to take turns to wear the shirt, and we just loved it because it was our shirt. We didn't have to share it with anybody else, and 20-something kids didn't have to wear it. And the two things really stood out to me from my box was, one of them was a toy car, and I call it a double-sided toy car because it's a wind-up engine. You wind it up, and it drives, and when it hits something, most of the wall flips over and it still keeps driving, so it's like the wheels a bit bigger than the body, so they call it a double-sided car. And I used to love play with that car. I never had a toy in my life. That was my first toy. When I grew up in the farm, my parents couldn't afford to get a toy to me, and even if they did get a toy to me, I would never have time to play with the toy because I spent most of the day working in the garden and then in the barn with the animals and cleaning out the barn, and then to bed and the same thing next day. So that was my very first toy, and I enjoyed every second I had that toy until the end came. I was sad that toy had to go, but I enjoyed every second I had with that. The second thing that stood out to me in the box was my favorite. It was a colored pens, and I used to love drawing. I had no idea why. I was horrible at it. It was a pretty sight to look at when I draw. I realized that when I got older, I stopped drawing, so less people can get hurt by it. But I love the pens, and every second I took them with me everywhere, and every second I spent drawing with them, I just enjoyed it. I took them to music school every day, to every class. It was kind of a bad thing because I would spend drawing most of the classes and miss the whole lecture teacher was talking about. But I loved them until that end came to them too, because ink is not forever. It runs out sooner or later. So every second I had them, and I enjoyed drawing with them. And when they had to go, it was sad. And the box made a huge impact on me. What made an impact on me also was coming out on the hallway. We had a long hallway. The rooms were on the side of the hallway. coming out in the hall and see all these kids opening up the boxes and all of them having a smile on their face, I just wanted to cry. It just shocked me. I was just amazed and just amazing. And the way I found out about that Operation Christmas Child and the box where I received the box from was when I got adopted to America. It was like 2.5, 3 years after. And my sister, my adopted sister, she's homeschooled, so she went to co-op every Friday, and she came home with some boxes, and I asked her, what are you doing? She said, I'm going to pack shoe boxes. So I know she didn't explain it further, so I don't know if she was too excited to pack them, or she just kind of was too into the box that she didn't explain it anymore. But I stood and watched what she was doing, and then when she put the box together, and I just kind of stood there for a second, and I froze there. When I saw the picture on the box, all that hope that I had before, it just kind of rushed back into me, and I couldn't say anything, and I got so excited, and all that hope I felt before just kind of all rushed back to me, and I just felt like crying again. And when I told them, it was kind of amazing that they've been packing those boxes like before I came to America, and they didn't know I received the box when they were adopting me. So it was amazing for them to find out that. And then a couple of days after, it's every Friday, co-op was every Friday. She took me next Friday with her to her co-op, and she introduced me to the lady who was like a head of packing the shoe boxes there. And she, every end of October, beginning of November, she has a big party in her garage, and she cleans out, that's once a year thing, she cleans out her garage actually for, no, I'm kidding, I don't know. But they would pack the shoe box into actual big cardboard box, and they would get not shipped out, driven away to the, I guess, North Carolina, where they pack the boxes. And she introduced me to that lady, and that lady just got so excited, and I got so excited to meet her. And so folks, I just encourage you, when you pack a shoe box, and it's like some people from previous talks I had, some people ask me a question, what should I put in the box? Put in the box what your heart tells you, because God will take the box to the right person who didn't really have a great day or doesn't have any hope for the rest of their life. God will take the box to the right person, and He will change your right life, and that kid will just be changed forever. And some of you say, oh yeah, pack the box, change a kid's life. It will change a kid's life forever, and yes, it changed a kid, 10-year-old orphan's boy life forever. And that this year we're going to celebrate 100 million shoebox, and I believe we can go more than that. So that's my story.